take shape, yes.
So how do you think, in terms of partnerships in this region between state government, non-government, neighbours, how do you think that's progressing?
It's starting to turn a fair bit. Like when the council the old Wooku council had a weed spraying program probably 10 years ago, and they just come along and give chemicals to every second person and said go play. And a lot of people hoarded the chemicals and wouldn't talk to neighbours and wouldn't spread it around, and the project sort of fell on its ears because people midstream were doing the spraying, but people at the top of the stream weren't. And you've got to attack these sort of things from the top of the catchment down. And yeah, it's starting to progress a fair way. Cost is a lot of things, and and availability of spray gear and that sort of stuff, which the council are all taking on board at the moment. Yeah.
And who do you think should bear the brunt of the cost?
Good point. Farmers cop a lot of the rap for all these weeds and pests and that, but a lot of cases we didn't introduce them. A lot of times the government departments brought these sort of things in, or fish people or something or other, and we're the ones that cop the brunt of it. But we don't want to see our wetlands and our areas destroyed, so we've got to attack it. But there's a limit on what we can spend too, because the profitability on the land is not what it should be to be able to spend the money that we should spend on doing these sort of things. Yeah.
And in terms of the Reef Rescue Project, because you came up with the idea of fencing off the creek, why did you want to do that?
The creek was getting very overgrown with lantana and other weeds and pests and stuff, and there's a fair bit of blue gums and that, and we're lucky in this area. Regrowth, I suppose lucky in one way that we haven't got to worry about planting trees, but regrowth's a big problem. But then if we can, there's a lot of other weeds and pests and burrs and all that sort of stuff comes in. So and once you've got an overgrown creek system, you can't attack it. Now, luckily this part of the area hasn't got any cat's claw in it yet, whereas the Munna's completely full of cat's claw. So if we can fence off the creek, control the lantana, keep the stock away from the creek banks, get the native grasses built back and get the blue gum seedlings coming up, we produce it back to more of its natural state. Yeah.
So you sound like you've got a good grasp of the natural processes that are going on within your property. Do you think people have a misconception about farmers and that understanding of those natural processes?
Yes, definitely. But like I said before, I'm fourth or fifth generation, and you listen to the old people, and fair enough. Some of the old generations made mistakes, cleared places they shouldn't do, and that sort of stuff. But after as they say, the soil gets in your blood, you can work with the land is better than trying working against it. And what you dealt with is what you got to work with, and you can reap rewards, but it's generational rewards. It doesn't happen overnight.
Mm. And you've got sons, have you?
One son, yep. He's a mad keen farmer. Well, the grades he's got at school, I don't think he can be anything else but a farmer. But anyway.
So you're obviously teaching him.
Yeah, it's very interesting. He's in grade 4, grade 3 last year. They did a project on the environment and catchment and all that sort of stuff, and he said to me, Dad, they're teaching me what you've already done, what you've already taught me. So yeah, and he seemed to be the highlight of the class because he knew what they were talking about, sort of thing. I think he even chipped the teacher on a few of the things. But yeah, it's got to start young. They've got to teach them through, and you've got to teach the people on the land. The numbers are dropping. But we're not here to destroy the land, we're here to work with it.
And do you think that particularly people out of these rural areas have an understanding of that?
No, because back in my father's generations, those sort of generations, there was always an uncle and aunt or a grandfather that people used to come out of the cities and go visit on school holidays. Now there's none of that. The people stay in their metropolitan areas. They don't leave, so they don't know what's outside the front gate, basically.
And how do you think that could change?
Educational. That's all you can do. Teach them at schools what projects and that sort of stuff, and get them involved. Ag Force is trying to do a bit, but probably not enough. But yeah, and government's getting them to alter. But the trouble is, we're only 10% of the vote or 12% of the voting, so governments don't really want to, help us out that way. But they're going to have to. They'll find out eventually that the land is needed.
A lot of farmers have these wet areas on their farms, and I guess in the past some of them have filled them in and you know, looked at including them in their productive land. Why have you decided to retain particularly these wetland areas as wetland areas?
Because they're here, I suppose, and they're naturally here. Well, and I said before, you've got to work with what you've got, not against it. And the cost of trying to change it probably would outweigh what you could earn off it, sort of thing. And it is a backup in dry times. The cattle do feed across it in dry times. And it's also, you've got to be careful with salt and salinity and all that sort of stuff. And you start looking at hydraulics of water and all that sort of stuff, and you start wondering, you know, if you do something here, maybe down the neighbour's place could come out a big salt break or something or other. So, yeah, it's just, I've always been told to look after the timber. It's always been taught in our generations that, you know, timber's like having money in the bank, and we keep a fair bit of millable timber on our hills and that sort of stuff, and the wetlands are just part of it, sort of thing.
And do you think that's the case with many of the graziers around here?
Yes, many of them. I contracted dozer driving for quite a few years before I would come back on the farm, and I count on your hand the idiots that you used to work for. But you know, the few people I refused to clear where they told me to clear because I said it's not going to benefit. But they're sort of really changing around now. But there is a lot of properties that have over-cleared. But the trouble with the government regulations that come through, they're restricting us that have got timber, not restricting the people that have over-cleared. They can still do whatever they want on their place, whereas the ones that's got a bit of timber are now restricted. We can't, you know, what we can do on those bits of land, which is, I reckon, unfair. Yeah.
And do you think legislation has its place, or do you think there's another way that farmers could be engaged in terms of land management?
Legislation is probably the worst form, because farmers are tied up to their properties and know their properties, and the worst thing they want is Big Brother telling them with a big stick telling them what to do. Education, incentives is probably a better way to go, because, you know, most farmers know what they want to do, but it's just cash strapped to be able to do particularly what they can do. Like a lot of people could employ half a dozen workers on their farm, but it's just financially they just can't. And a lot of projects that they look at that's not going to really give them financial rewards immediately, they just put in the back pocket and don't do. I achieved probably more than what I could have got done, because I probably 2 to 3 times more than what I could have got done under my own finances, and it just helped doing a bigger area, and it benefits the system.